self-talk. You should tell you, I like myself. I like myself. And there are some trainers that will tell you that.
Yeah.
I was taught a long time ago by, and this may have been a Tom Hopkins thing, so I hate to not give credit where credit is due. But when someone says no to you, or you happen to be blown out, or somebody doesn't really give you the time of day, or somebody who really needs what you have just isn't open enough to hear what you have to say, as you're walking out the door or you're hanging up, to know what your average sale is and the number of contacts that you need to make in order to make that sale happen, and to consider that you just earned that amount of money. And let me generalize that. Let's say your average sale is $100, and you need to have 20 people contacted to be able to do that. You do the math. Well, that's $5 every time, right? Yeah. So it's 5 times 20. Was that right? No, it's 5 times. What would that be? 20? My math is horrible. I think it is 5 anyway. Let's figure it's $5. So every time you walk out, knowing that you need 20 contacts to be able to make that, you'd walk out and you'd say, thanks for the $5 in your head.
Yeah.
And you'd say, okay, great. So every time I walk in, because I've got to walk into 20 places in order for one to say yes. Right. So every time of the 19, somebody says no, or you're off or whatever, you just say, okay, there's $5 in my pocket and I just need to keep going. The reason not everyone is in sales is because of rejection, because of that very same thing you're talking about, Yuri. People they can't get around not being successful all the time, and it starts to wear on them. And I think more than anything else, those salespeople who have the confidence to really kind of plow through those bad times, to be able to say thanks for the $5 and feel good about that and have a smile on your face for the next person, are the ones that succeed, because the person you're going to next has no idea what just happened to you on the 19 visits prior.
Right. Right.
So much positive self-talk. And then the other thing that really at the time became really popular was motivational speaking on cassettes. And I had a cassette player in my car, so I'm dating myself. But to go into the car and it take 5 minutes in of one of those guys and to say, it's not me, it's really, it's the situation or whatever it happens to be, and you just feel really good about that.
Yeah.
There might be a third version of that's more contemporary, but I don't know what it is. It's probably just find somebody on YouTube on your phone and just take 5 minutes of that. But those are the two things that helped me get by.
Okay, sure. What trainers did you like listening to? So were you into Tony Robbins, or was there another?
Tony Robbins didn't speak to me. I don't know, the hot coals thing. It just didn't resonate with me.
Yeah.
Jim Rohn, who is one of the more foremost philosophers of our time, was a guy that really resonated with me. Tom Hopkins was one. The Art of Negotiation, whose name escapes me right now, but it'll come to me in just a moment. A British guy had a terrific series of tapes. But, the contemporaries of today are really quite extraordinary in what they're doing. And I was fortunate enough to write a book myself, and it took from that many of the inspiration from many of the people that I had learned from. Again, in radio, it would have been Chris Lytle, my mentor, Dave Gifford, who is a marvelous sales trainer and motivator and is retired now in New Mexico, is a terrific friend. I was not afraid to reach out to those people who wrote books and just ask for their advice in person. And I've had the chance to talk one-on-one with many of them. And it's been a real pleasure.
Well, that's great. So I would like to talk about your book.
Please.
What made you decide to write a book?
I was enamored with books in general. I was kind of a book junkie, and you've probably known some of those. I just like to collect them and have them, and I just feel like as soon as I buy them, I'm smarter for some reason.
I know what you mean.
And so I've just been just fascinated by the fact that they exist and that normal people write them. And so my goal, beginning around that time that I left radio, was I wanted to be a published author.
Okay.
I didn't know what I wanted to write, but I wanted to be a published author. So while I was at the radio station, I actually stole the station's cassette recorder that they used in the newsroom, and I went up to Book Expo America up in Chicago, which was the trade show essentially for authors and publishers with bookstores. And so I went up and I had the radio station logo on my shirt, and I faked being a member of the news department. And I went to a bunch of people who had just written books, who were, of course, very interested in talking to the media.
Of course.
I had half a dozen questions prepared for them. And it was stuff like, what's the title of your book? How did you come around it? What's your publisher's relationship with you? How did it go? And then I asked the one question that I really wanted to know. What is your one piece of advice for an unagented, unpublished author in today's marketplace? And that's what I really wanted to know. Mm-hmm. So I got past all those other 5 questions and I got to mine. And without a doubt, the most frequent answer I got to that was overwhelming, was don't give up. Don't give up. And I took that away and I did it 2 successive years. I just wanted to see if the answer had changed. And so the second year, not only would I get done, but I would turn off the machine and I would talk to the authors about my situation. And they were very generous with their advice and their counsel. And one gentleman who was just a delightful soul, elder gentleman who had 10 or 15 books that he'd written, sat down and I told him, I said, I want to write a book, but I don't want it to be just words. I want it to be something that's meaningful. Yeah. And he looked right at me and he poked me right in the chest, like old guys do sometimes. Mm-hmm. But he says, that's great. That's just what you need to consider. Don't write anything that's crap. There's too many people. You need to turn to the audience and say, all these people are writing crap. Don't write crap. And so he and I actually became very good friends, and I ended up writing the foreword to his very last book. He just passed away last year, and so I really credit him and many others with the courage to be able to go forward. My first book was actually done with a co-author, a very, very good friend of mine, Andy Corbus. He and I are locals. We grew up kind of together in the same community, and he was an owner of a franchise, a honey baked ham franchise here in town, and I was his ad rep. And we would sit and talk about how people that advertised sometimes would say, it's fast, friendly service, and then you go into their place and it's not fast and it's not friendly and it's not even service.
Right.
And so that's what they're advertising and they're not delivering. He said, how can we help people actually be genuine in the way in which they advertised? And so literally it became a book, and it was co-written. The two of us wrote it together. It's called Reality Sells. Mm-hmm. We went to the Book Expo in New York together to promote this thing and to just bring this manuscript around to find a publisher. And lo and behold, we found a wonderful gentleman who was running a small business print called W Business Books. Arthur Chow is his name, who was willing to take a risk on us. And that was our very first book. And so the next year in New York, Andy and I were signing our book at Book Expo America, right next to, gosh, I'm trying to think of some of the others. Colin Powell was there, and wow. Jack Canfield, and many of the others who I've known for my whole life. And so here I am, literally signing books next to these people in the different booths. And yeah. For those who've never been to Book Expo, it's a fascinating study. They have booths, and they have these, long stanchions like you'd have at Disney World, like you go onto the rides. And the lines, of course, are longer for the more, people. And they sign the books and they talk to you, and they have books to give away.
Right.
And, they'll only sign for maybe half an hour, or whatever that is. And so we had our little stall and, where we were, and we happened to be next to where Jack Canfield was. Well, his line was really long. So we would encourage folks to see, if you're not, if you don't want to wait for Jack, this is a really good book too. So we ended up kind of like being our own salespeople coming in and said, we'll sign it for you and everything. 2 of us, 2 for 1.
Yeah.
And so it was just like, we were just the poor souls nobody knew. But there were a few others from the media that came up and would say, oh, I hadn't heard about your book, and tell me about it. People that were from, places that, magazines and such. Yeah. So we were very happy to do that. And so it was some great memories from that. I mean, we were nobodies and, trying to be somebodies. And today Andy's a very successful professor at our local university and trains much of what we were able to write at that time.
Great.
And then, moving a little further forward, I was, I'm really more of the sales guy, and he's really more the service guy. Mm-hmm. I was approached by John Wiley when I was there at the National Speakers Association convention that we would like to write a book. We love the name of your company. We would love you to write a book called The 800-Pound Gorilla of Sales. And, well, that was something I had toyed with anyway. And so literally it was a collaboration between John Wiley and me to come up with the book itself. And so I became, for 4 months, my wife would say she was a writer's hermit, or a writer's, what do you call those, writer's widow.
Widow, yep.
As I did interviews and wrote furiously here and had wonderful support from John Wiley and their editors. And we put out a book in record time, and it is proven to be one of the very best things ever happened to my career.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wonderful. So with your book, what are some of the, I guess, a quick like sales kind of idea that you could kind of throw out there? Because I know that a lot of people think of sales, they're like, all I think of right now is the used car salesman.
Right.
So how do you get over that stereotype? Because obviously that's not a good sales technique at all. So what do you encourage? And if there was like one piece of sales technique you could impart to the listeners, what would it be?
Well, it's that sales in general is not manipulation and trickery. It's about listening and solving problems. Mm-hmm. It's finding gaps in people's lives and helping them bridge them. It's that place between where they are and where they want to be. And if your product or service can help them bridge that chasm to get to where they want to go, then you're doing it right. And too many sales reps get into or are labeled as dishonest or sneaky or just literally after your money. And those are the very few. There are really far fewer of those than people realize. Now, there may be some internet snipers out there that are really kind of screwing up the industry again.
Right.
But by and large, when sales is done right, it is a noble profession and should be treated as such. And for those who are looking for work, I have not done this TED Talk yet, Yuri, but I hope to at some time. And it literally is, if people could understand that sales was a noble profession and is really one that helps people get where they need to go, then there would be no employment in the U.S., unemployment. There are enough sales jobs right now that if everyone that was unemployed would take one of those sales jobs, there would be zero unemployment.
Right.
And the challenge is that people who are unemployed today don't see themselves as sales reps. They don't see themselves as sales material. Yeah. But if they only understood that it's something that you're discussing with others, that if there's a fit, that it's great. If there's not a fit, then we can part friends and we're all right with that. That's when sales becomes helpfulness. And that's, in my book, what I really try to attempt to say. There are 12 things. I interviewed many, many successful salespeople. Mm-hmm. And what I found were 12 qualities that distinguish the top sales reps from everyone else. And they aren't necessarily the top in terms of millions and millions of dollars. They may be in a group of 10 reps that's doing 80% of the business in their office. And so it's that person that's really doing a good job. Yeah. The authenticity thing we talked about earlier, that discussion at the bar from my radio days, was something that came true to others, that saying you have to be genuine to people. And if it's not a good deal, you need to be able to tell them this would not be something that you should purchase. Mm-hmm. Some of the very best people do that. There was a real estate gentleman that I talked to that who was working with an older lady who was willing to sell her house for 10 times less than what it was worth. And the story goes in the book where he literally could have taken the house and turned it around and made 10 times what he paid on it. But he chose instead to take the high road and say, who else in your family, because she was very elderly, yeah. Is there a family member or something we could talk to before we sell the house? And so they had one of their granddaughters come in, and so he explained to her what the value of her real estate happened to be because of what was going on around her, and convinced the two of them to sell for what it was really worth. And those are the sorts of things that are bright spots in sales. And so that's what I wanted to impart in this, is that why sales is a noble profession and why perhaps you ought to think about it, because we add value at times. Mm-hmm. We can actually help people figure out what they need to buy versus what they thought they wanted to buy. I'm no expert at home improvements, but if I have a toilet that's broken in my house and I go to Home Depot, I don't know what parts to buy.
Right.
If I go in and say, I need this part, one of two different people could serve me. One could say, oh, yeah, I know where that is. Let's go over and get one. The second person could say, well, what's your toilet doing? And they say, well, the little thing on the bottom is connecting, and so all the water is dripping out. Say, oh, all you need is a stopper. That's no problem. You don't need all the expensive parts. Let's go get one of those. So the second person, of course, is the one that helped me the most, even though number one was able to bring me to the parts and show me all the parts. And so I believe that in selling, that's what we need to be able to do, is to be